Okay, I'm going to start the ball. Hello, my name is Peter Jacobsen. I work for the Tłįcho government. I'm going to talk about the Tłįcho Equinahudeke caribou monitoring program. And this is a story that goes back very long time. I'm just part of the program, but it speaks to the whole story about Tłįcho's relationship to caribou. So this program really comes out of what we have experienced in the north, is the decline of the barren caribou herds. And for everybody who's involved in that and are caribou hunters, they know how devastating the effect that has had on the ability of people to hunt. And the Tłįcho government and the ENR, or the NWT ENR, banned caribou hunting in 2015 of the Bathurst herd. So the Bathurst herd, we used to be like 480,000 animals, a couple of decades ago, and now there's only 8,000 animals left. So it's a really sharp decline, and this program is kind of a way to find out why. So all of these numbers about the caribou came out from NWT's population surveys, and there was a lot of controversies with those numbers, but people started to believe in it, and the Tłįcho chiefs started to they really believed in it and wanted to work conserving the animals. But they wanted their own people out on the land. They wanted their own elders, harvesters, using their traditional knowledge to find out about the caribou and what's happening on the land. So we initiated this program in 2016, and it's only me here, but I work with all these great people out on the land, and so I wish I could be here and talk as well, but we only got 10 minutes, so I'll do a short overview. So that's kind of the background. And in 2016, it was only 4 of us at that first photo. We were 2 teams of 4 people, and we just flew out to the barren land, to Tłįcho Lake, to try to find the caribou, because there's so few caribou left. So we set up camp on Tłįcho Lake, and we didn't really know what to do those first days and first weeks. We're supposed to monitor caribou, but there's no caribou to be found. But eventually the program just really grew into what people have always done. And that's what this program is about. It's just doing what people have always done on the land. So the elder, Michel Louis Rebesca, on the photo there, kind of assumed his role as an elder and just led our group to find the caribou. And we started doing wildlife monitoring as doing what hunters have always done. And that was to find the Equinahudeke, the caribou crossings, and go to these places and just wait for caribou. And then know where the land crossings are, the Thaw, and just sit there and wait for caribou to come. And as the caribou came, we would pack up our camp and then go in the boat and go follow the caribou with our boat, and then walk inland to these Thaw and the Wata, the eskers, like this picture here, to get as close as we can to caribou and watch them and see what the conditions are to the herd. And this is like this photo here is it's actually just in Nunavut. And if you look closely on the photo, you can see there's a circle of rocks, and it means like this exact spot is where hunters used to sit before and watch for caribou. And then we find things like these artifacts, and then we really know we're on the right track. And if you follow this esker about 7 kilometers to the end of the lake there, there's another 10 circles. And these are exact same places that people used to go. So the essential part of our program was just to do exactly what people had done before and just follow really the lead of the elders. And that's how we would do caribou monitoring. So I think a take-home message from this program is that a research methodology in 2020 is just doing what elders have always done, and that's how it's working. I think it's a cool thing, but it's really why it's working, because people have lived here forever, and we're just doing what they're doing, and that's how we can do monitoring, and that's how the Michel Louis Rebesca and other elders, that's how they wanted it. That's how they set this up. Another part is like at the end there it says walk the land and wait and watch, and the elders always say like if you walk the land, you know the land. So that's what we do. We walk the land every day, and every year we're out there for this year, or last summer we were there for 9 weeks. This year we're going to be there for almost 3 months. Last year we were 25 people, and this year we're planning to be 35 people. They're just walking these eskers and waiting at the water crossing and just really being on the landscape and watching the caribou. So I don't know how much time I got, but anyway. The first year when we were there, we're trying to, well, at least me, I was trying to figure out what specifically should we look at? What should this caribou monitoring program be about? And every day I was kind of asking Michel Louis, what should we look for? What should we look for? And he just said, we watch everything. No, stop asking questions. So I thought, okay, that's brilliant. We watch everything. And that's what it is. It's really just understanding the whole ecosystem together with the indigenous culture in it. And then Ekwu means caribou in Tłįcho. So, we've been looking at climate change. What are the effects of climate change? It's so warm during the summer that all the summer snow melts. Where are the caribou going to go to cool down? Where do they get away from bugs? So we see them like this in the water. That's the only place they could cool down now that the temperature is increasing every summer. And for industrial disturbance, like this is Lupin Mine, and here's our little group there, just the 4 of us walking. And then we're watching closely the habitat around the mines to see what the impacts are. And what the habitat is every summer for the calves. You can see that some calves are nursing of their mothers there at the far end photo. But what we're seeing in the last few years is that we don't really see more calves. It's really a declining trend. And for the population of the caribou to increase, there need to be more calves so they can grow up and have their own calves. But we don't really see any calves. It's a very disturbing sign. But what we do see is there's lots of wolves in that area. But the reason why there's so many wolves is that, the harvester is saying, because there's no wolf hunters out there anymore. Canada spent 150 years trying to get people off the land. Well, those people were harvesters. They were wolf hunters. And the Inuit people who live there used to hunt lots of wolves. And now there's only one remaining full-time wolf hunters. So it's trying to understand all these things combined. And that's really the essence of our program. And it's really what the elder, Michel Louis, Rebecca, and other elders wanted. So we call our methodology, we watch everything. And that's kind of the theoretical part of the do as hunters do. So, okay, I'll just talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned. Like I said, key element is just for these kind of community-based monitoring programs, just to do what people have always done and build on their strength. Because it's amazing, like what these guys are capable of doing, and here's our guys just watching a herd of caribou up by Jericho Mine. So the only thing that's really different is that I'm there, and I'm recording everything and taking photos and GPS and all that stuff. But that's really the only difference, and I think that's why people are really into it, and they really believe in it, really want this to succeed, right? But by doing that, we're compiling all this information, and we're trying to create a space for traditional knowledge in the management of these herds and in decision making. So creating a space, by bringing that knowledge into these boardrooms and in the discussions, but also bringing the people in there. And we're trying to get 1 or 2 harvesters or elders with us to these workshops with the government or with other wildlife management boards, so that we create that space for them, because that space is not there. You have to make it or take it. But another part is how these monitoring programs is really about connecting to the land and connecting to language, culture, and way of life. Here's our camp that we built last summer on Contueto Lake. And we had some youth with us who stay there for 6 weeks, and they come back with stars in their eyes, because nobody has been to these places for so many years. And for some of the youth to go there with elders and we're watching caribou, we're doing research, but at the same time, those youth can sit and listen to the language, listen to the stories and see caribou really close up and be like really connect to the land that way. So that's sometimes I think we're doing a caribou monitoring program, but on the other hand, what we're really doing is just like continuing cultural identity. Language, culture, and way of life is what Tłįcho government is really wanting to do and really working on sustaining. So it's an equally important part of doing research is this part here that I talked about. And the last point I made is that we have a Tłįcho Elder Advisor group, and it's like really their like long-term vision, right, to do this. And I think that's why as well it's working, and the chiefs really see the benefit of this, because we're really doing what the elders envisioned, and really taking their methods and their theories and all this into a research program in 2020. So it's really important to have that long-term vision that the elders and our group created. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what our program is about. But like I said, I think the real take-home message is like, do what people always done, and that's really the key thing. Just like really continue those methods that people have used and the way that the knowledge and how they interact with the land, and that is, it's the best way a research program can, or a wildlife monitoring program can continue in 2020.
Thank you.
Wow, what an amazing last couple of days, huh? Let's give a hand to the hosts and the organizers. So I want to talk about research from two perspectives. One is engaging with the research community, and then one is looking at research to inform the work that we're doing, like as students of our history, our culture, our language. So I'll start maybe with an engagement with the academia. And so when I was the stewardship director, my leadership, I applied for a position, and the resources for that position came out of the Coast Opportunity Funds that Doug Niesloss mentioned. That was a $60 million fund, and the leadership said, we want you to create this integrated resource management office. And so I applied for the job and got it, and so they had this big wish list of things that the leadership wanted to do around an integrated resource management office. So I looked at it and I went back and I talked to leadership, and I said, I can definitely take a run at what your vision and your interests are and your priorities are, but honestly, the deliverables will be laser thin. And the reason why is because we don't have the capacity in our community to really give effect to the implementation of that vision. If you will allow me to engage with institutions to support research to do some of the heavy lifting for us, then I think we will make some significant progress as we advance our interests. And they agreed. So I reached out to the University of British Columbia, University of BC, Vancouver Island University, and Simon Fraser University. So 4 universities with specific objectives. Like Vancouver Island University is excellent at applied learning, and UVic is excellent at public policy. UBC's got a fisheries program second to nobody in the world, and SFU's got an excellent resource and environmental management faculty. And so I cultivated relationships through establishing written formal agreements or protocol agreements with these post-secondary institutes. The director of the resource and environmental management faculty and I talked about this, and we had a lot of people come in, and at one point I had 30 PhDs and master students working for me. And so that's some serious brain power that you're bringing into the room. And it is the director had talked to me about the research question, like with academics. The research question, he said, is like a gift. If you can help a young student be able to formulate a research question and go deeper onto that question, that's both a gift to them and it's a gift to the community. And so I started to think about what are the research questions that would inform our responsibility and my responsibility in overseeing stewardship. So there was this vast network, if you could imagine, connecting the dots of questions around stewardship within our territory. And people would come to me and they'd say, I'd like to do this. And I said, my question was, how does that inform our responsibility to uphold stewardship within our territory? It could be in an aquatic piece, environmental piece, and weather, a biological question, whatever. And so that was very powerful and very liberating. And it saved a ton of money on consultants. So we have multiple multi-year research projects, and it got to be too much. We were working with the Hakai Research Network, and I said, I can't deploy my staff to handle all of your research people. And so what we did was they funded $75,000 a year in 5-year increments, a research coordinator to handle all of the logistics around these questions. And also with the research, it can become very invasive with knowledge keepers because we tell them, get your baseline, understand what your baseline is, and then from there you can go deeper on your specific question, because what happens is it becomes fatiguing for our elders and our knowledge keepers because, the nature of the research methodologies, you go in and you ask these questions to establish your baseline, and it's exhausting. So we don't do that to our people. And so so we began to color in this piece around the multiple research questions, the relationship between local and traditional knowledge and Western methodologies, because the nature of Western research and science is to kind of drill down. And then, so how do you bring together the drilling down of this historical approach to knowledge management, which is very sort of disciplined and sometimes adversarial around peer review process, almost combative around protecting your idea and arguing for your point around what's going to rise up. That's the theory. It's just by design to compete so that the idea becomes, it's vetted through the peers. But that was quite different to the approach that we were taking around this, the way we see the world. Like, for example, with Western science and research, they would take a couple of little ideas or a little bit of data and use computer models and extrapolate out to come up with management practices in theory. But for us, we were looking at it over a long period of time, and then that's where the rub was many times. So that's a part of this notion of reconciliation in the academic environment. So that's kind of where we're at now. We do use the best of what Western science has to offer, but we also use our local and traditional knowledge, and we drive the agenda. We decide what the research questions are, and like I said, how does this inform our responsibility? And I really wanted to share that in the context of external relationships with the research community. Now, the second thing that I want to share is, so we did this project with the National Museum of Science and Innovation. And so just the thing that we did was we used a participatory research model. So we talked to 50 of our members, and this was about the tribe. I guess it would be considered a social science research project. We spoke with 50 of our members and it was a young lady who did her master's on this project, and my daughter is currently working on her PhD, and she collaborated with this non-Indigenous woman to put together this project. And we interviewed 50 of our community members about the role of the resurgence of the ocean-going canoe and what it means to our people. And then we came up with kind of 7 main themes, and within those themes, we created these little vignettes. And so it isn't what Frank Brown thinks or what this researcher thinks. No, this is what the community has said and what they have prioritized in the research. And so as an example, I wanted to show you maybe a vignette here. So we've produced a feature-length documentary. We've produced this online exhibition. You could see it at Sacred Journeys exhibition.com, I believe. It's up here. Sacred Journeys exhibit.com. We're currently producing a traveling exhibit that will travel for 5 years and 2 million people will see once it's finally completed. So we've been building this up over the last 5 years. So we think about it in those kinds of time frames around putting our message out, and it's coming from the Indigenous worldview and through our own voices. So as an example, you see we got all of these little paddles that more or less represent the different themes. So I'll try to find something that's thematic here. Having a bit of trouble with my moving this.
This one or?
Yeah, sure. That one, or let me see here.
The connection one.
Okay. Maybe we'll do this one. This is my uncle that's going to come up here. Okay.
When you're out in the ocean, a lot of young men that went on the journey, and they talked about their experience, how they felt connected to the land, to the resources. Because when you're out there and no motor, and you see things and hear things that you wouldn't hear when you're out in the ocean, the spirits aren't scared of you.
When you're out in the canoe, it's different than being out on the water in any other way, because you see it differently. You're closer, you're in relation to it. You can feel your hands blistering up from your paddle. You feel it on your back. You watch your posture. You watch the way your body interacts with the ecosystem, with the water around you. And you literally, you're so much closer to it. And if you flip or you go over, if something happens, your life's in its hands.
It's not just a journey. You know, it's spirituality. It's facing Mother Nature and facing your greatest fear, you know, when you're out in the water, and testing your own strength.
It's connecting with the land, with the water. It's a real purification, you know, type of ceremonial experience that you have.
My kids went, and I was so happy, and they really, really enjoyed it. They couldn't believe how much positive energy that they received from traveling on that canoe and then reconnecting with nature.
So this is just one of the little vignettes, the 13 vignettes that we have, and the research part of it is really about how do we support decolonization to inform our thinking about who we are as Indigenous place-based people, and what are those teachings, and how are we using technology and resources to put this together, because and have our own people have their own voice in telling the stories and sharing our stories. And this is an example of the value of research for us, and then sharing it out to the general public. 2 million people see this. We could create links to our ecotourism enterprises. People say, I want to go there. So same thing with the feature-length film. So using these tools in our own voice, and the whole point of the authenticity of our voices, to be able to share our story and stand in our truth, and at the same time be able to create opportunities. So thank you very much, and I'm going to be leaving after this, so I just got to say again, thank you to the organizers, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all, to share, and I look forward to next steps and seeing what you come up with. It's going to be amazing. Wallace Gayasika, thank you.
Thank you.
Peter, are you gonna come up? You gonna sit? Where's the clicker?
Perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. I was just looking at everybody, and everybody looks like my niece when she first wakes up in the morning. So my first challenge is always try to make her smile, and sometimes it's a struggle. So my name is Cazon. I'm the manager of lands and resources for Lidikwe First Nation in Fort Simpson. I would be the point of contact between Scotty Creek Research Station and my band. Good times. So the dynamics of my presentation changed over the last few days. So I was supposed to do a community, what it's like to work with Scotty Creek, but then I saw on the agenda, I have to speak on the Tłįcho Collaborative on Permafrost, so that changed the focus. I was like, okay, bring it on. So, well, let's get this thing on the go. So there's going to be a few words, but then it's going to be a whole bunch of pictures. So, yeah, so I just basically stole this off the DCOP website, on Scotty Creek's website. So basically, changing permafrost. The changing climate and environment around us has been identified by the communities of the Tłįcho. Permafrost thaw has been an increasing concern to communities, harvesters, and traditional land users, as you may see some examples later in the photos that I'm going to present. Through conversations with communities, a need to develop and mobilize an understanding of permafrost thaw and training for decision makers and users. And to do this, the Scotty Creek Research Station and DFN, Tłįcho First Nations, produced the Tłįcho Collaborative on Permafrost. To use leading edge science and TK to co-develop, predictive permafrost thaw and risk management strategies. In discussion with communities through the Tłįcho, there was a need based on two-way knowledge exchange, communication, to guide our understanding of permafrost thaw. Here we go. Where's the laser? There we go. Right there is Scotty Creek, and these are watersheds in the southern Tłįcho. Right there's Fort Simpson, Lidikwe, and there's the Tłįcho. Currently, William, call me Bill Quinton, was supposed to be here helping me present, but right now they're doing field work with young students, high school students from across the Tłįcho, and they're in Scotty Creek right now. I was actually emailing them this morning because trying to mobilize to get some guardians out to them to help them with this weekend's events. Yep. Winter Eco Hydrology Field Camp, that's what they're doing. Okay. So, my interactions with Scotty Creek Research Station started in 2017 when we were preparing for National Energy Board hearings for the Line 21 pipeline replacement project. In preparation for that, we had a membership meeting in the fall, just after first snow. There was a video that one of our members took with Chief when they went to go, actually, I don't want to show the whole video, it's like half an hour. And there was some interesting things that we saw on the video besides the actual pipeline areas. Like right here. Like right here's a Coast Guard mark. And right here they refer to this as Drunken Trees. So basically what's happening is there's a permafrost is melting and there's saturation of the water, and the trees are starting to lean because they're not connected to the ground as well. So that's one of the pictures. Here is a slump. I really like the idea that it snowed to show this because you can really see the contrast between the river and where the land subsided and slid into the river. So that's just one, that's a small one. And it gets bigger. So you can see like the ground going into further inland, up to about 1 kilometer to 2 kilometers. You'll start seeing trees starting to lean, and then an event that happens and occurs like this, where the land basically just subsides into the river. Right there's that Coast Guard marker. That becomes a point of conversation later. I presented this during March to the Guardians when we were doing Guardian training for the Line 21 replacement project. When I presented this, I was in the training group that was with communities across the Tłįcho. So there was AROM, Guardians from Fort Providence, Wrigley, JMR, Nahanni Butte, Hay River, Kikiza. And everyone kept saying, we're seeing that slumping everywhere, up and down the Mackenzie River, up and down the Liard River, tributaries, rivers, creeks, anything feeding into the big river. So it basically like shed this light on something like everyone just didn't really pay attention to, but now everyone really is. So this is a fresh subsidence that I took in pictures in July 23rd, I think it was. It's less than 2 weeks old. So as soon as I took these, because we were doing a pipeline inspection of the work sites for the pipeline replacement project. So what we ended up doing was, I took like a lot of pictures. It was like, how do I send all this stuff to Bill? That was fun. But I did set up Dropbox first time and fired I think 40 pictures over to Bill, and he was taking a look at them, and it was point of interest that they wanted to follow up on and go visit on the ground. So this was all happening in just upriver, about 14, 15 clicks up the Mackenzie. So this is later on in that season. This would be September 27th. It's a day that will go down in infamy as one of the windiest days on the river. These are 3 researchers from Scotty Creek. That's Ryan Condon. I think he works for NWT now. John Coughlin, he's a technician that supports the camp and the research students in setting up their projects. And I believe that's Olivia. She's doing her doctorate on permafrost model, computer model, permafrost prediction and computer model. Yeah, they actually came by the Tłįcho Kagudi meeting we had last week, and we were discussing this actual trip, and it's like, yeah, they still talk about it. So this is a picture of that same slump from the river and the boat. So what things that are missing previously that you saw was just like that sense of scale. So that's one of the researchers right there. So you could tell, like, this is just the amount of ground that moved when all that land subsided. Oh, okay. Yeah. So with the interests in the permafrost, now we're going to backtrack a bit. I just wanted to take you down that little trail to tell you, like, that's what they did, and they went and investigated, because one of the things that they're trying to do is figure out ways to possibly fix this. And it's going to be very difficult, because when they were probing the ground here, the issue was that the ground is very granular, so when the permafrost is in there, it's not easy to grow back. So we're going to backtrack a bit to some of the monitoring that the Guardians did on the Line 21 project. So one of the opportunities we had was to get some LiDAR information along the track to the right-of-way in the working areas. And here we got some Guardians doing some work. So there's William, call me Bill Quinton, training Guardians on how to set up permafrost transects for monitoring at and or near the right-of-way. That's one of the Guardians working with the LiDAR crew to ground truth information that they were gathering. And here's some more Guardians setting up some probes. Right there's the transects. And there they are working on the right-of-way. Or just off the right-of-way, I'm sorry. Okay, so we're going to skip ahead a little bit. This is pictures from last year. Before I went on vacation last summer, Bill had asked me, like, can you get the Guardians to start actively gathering some information, like instances of new subsidence? So we got them a camera, and they started taking pictures. This is a fresh slump from last year, just up towards Camsell Bend. So this is one of the things that the Guardians figured out was kind of like the new development of traditional knowledge, gauging the age of a slump and subsidence by basically like the vegetative growth that falls in with it and just the health of the leaves. They can kind of gauge how old that the subsidence is, so to help judge whether they need to take shots of it. There's one of our Guardians, Edward Cholo, friend of mine. And there's his workmate from AROM, Nicholas DePelham, another Guardian. They're doing a water quality test analysis. So one of the things was, like, they have their work that they need to do for AROM. So I was trying to find, they need to gather this information. What? I got 2 minutes. I'm almost done. So trying to find something invasively, they won't disrupt a lot of their work. And I got a new camera, the Olympus TG6, I think it was called. So this way it has a GPS, takes direction, takes weather, the whole nine. Basically, so they don't have to have a clipboard, just adding to their field kit of stuff that they need to bring out. So they just have a camera, works great. So some changes in climate, grizzly bear tracks on the Liard. So it's not something you see often. So range changes of the animals. So that's one of the things that the Guardians look out for. It's not just the water quality and checking out this, checking out that. They also check out for wildlife. Oh, no reactions, eh? This got a few of them last week. Another instance of fresh subsidence, August 28th. A bear. I could have loaded this thing up with like 1,000 pictures of wildlife. Yeah, that's what everybody wants to see, but it's like, no, I can't. So an issue of subsidence, September 5th. This is starting to get interesting because one of the students that was taking the information she's collecting in Scotty Creek is from 1986 cut lines. So basically what she was measuring is man-made disturbances changing water flow. So basically water flows from one bog to the next bog to the next bog. But if you have a cut line that's going this way, it could actually start draining that bog and moving the water a different direction, the way it's not supposed to go. So one of the first things she recognized was man-made disturbances contribute to the increase of permafrost thaw. Look at that, man-made disturbance, permafrost thaw. So that's part of the Coast Guard marker that fell down from subsidence and came down river a bit. So okay. So the Tłįcho Collaborative on Permafrost. So that was a lot of LKFN, or Litecoin First Nation information. Other information, Fort Province is having issues with permafrost thaw in regards to flooding in their traditional areas. G-Marie First Nation, they're having issues with sinkholes in their traditional areas. PEDZK, Wrigley, is having issues of sinkholes like really near their community. I believe they're having subsidence issues in Trout Lake too. And so what we're trying to do, the work we're trying to do with Scotty Creek is create a computer model, and that'd be an example of it. So work going forward is we're trying to develop a computer model with the student Olivia and trying to predict where there's permafrost and is it receding. But the thing is we need to fill it with information to make a more accurate computer model. So what they need is using the LiDAR stuff, ground probes, and ground truthing through the guardians from the various communities in their traditional areas. We'd be able to collect more information to fill this thing up to make it a smarter model so we can hopefully predict permafrost thaw. That information could help with infrastructure issues such as roads, cabins, concerns from harvesters, traditional land users, and I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dieter. That was a great set of presentations, a really wide variety of things that are happening and different kinds of partners that are being brought in to meet certain goals. So I want to just open it up to the audience. We've got not quite as much time as I had hoped, but we do have 10 or 15 minutes for questions. So I think we have someone wandering around with a microphone, do we? Deb has a question, and then.
Of course. Yeah, pick me. My question's for Dieter on the Scotty Creek Research Station. Coming from a background of someone that in the 80s worked with the Dene Nation to document the community concerns around social, economic, and environmental impacts of the Enbridge pipeline. You talked about your work helping to identify and deal with infrastructure issues, but you didn't mention potential vulnerabilities of the Enbridge pipeline, and I just wonder if that's a factor that you look at or that people in communities talk about with all the slumping along the river.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes? I think it'd be one of the contributing issues of why the pipeline was shut down in the first place was because of subsidence issues on the sides of the river. So it was a concern, and that's one of the points that they want. Oh, I thought that was me. It's like a sing ringer. So the concern that Enbridge needed to fix was that they had to drill a lot lower and into bedrock. So this thing went into bedrock, and it was very far away from the sides of the river now. Okay?
Question over here.
It's more of a comment, especially to research. You know, in NWT, we're at the leading edge because we got legislation that protects our research. One is through the ARI, Aurora Research Institute run through the college. The other one is SIMP, which comes under the Mackenzie Valley Act, which there is legislation protecting it. The other one is Northern Contaminants. But you got to know what we got to quit worrying about research. Because if somebody puts an application in, we get to review it before they get the nod. We could always ask the researcher, well, this is as close to what we're thinking, the information we need. Could you help us within that research period? So it could turn into a win-win for everybody. But we got to know what we got up here, because the world is looking at the Northwest Territories on what we got. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that we were working on with the Denneday Resources Committee and the harvesters in Tłįcho is they come in and we have coffee, we have conversations in regards to some of the issues and concerns that they're having out there. Like with the changes that's happening with the permafrost in the wintertime, when the ground usually freezes flat, it's not freezing flat no more. All the water's disappearing, so the ground's like this. And like, just it's hard on your machine. You're skidooing out there, right? Like you hit one bump, boom, that's $2,500. You're not gonna get that fixed early in the trapping season. So it's just, we brought these kind of concerns to Scotty Creek, and that's when they started kind of working with us and conversing with us in regards to why a lot of this stuff's happening, and to explain how these problems, not to be fixed, but why these are happening. Because it's not easy to read what's happening out on the land anymore, because it's just, it's like it's changing.
Great, thanks. I think there's a lot of questions in the audience, so what we want to do is maybe take 2 or 3, and then we'll let the panel respond to the ones that have been asked, okay? I think that might work, let's try that.
Yeah, excellent presentations. Question I have is for interpretation of the knowledge that you've gained through your research. I know there's a huge gap between the universities and the people that have all the knowledge. And then when you collect that knowledge, sometimes the interpretation of that knowledge is not exactly what the knowledge keepers had in mind when they provided it to you. So is there a check in the system where you say, okay, this is the knowledge that we've gathered from you folks. Is it correct?
We'll just take one more question, sure.
And the reason I ask that question is because the knowledge gained is going to be used in management plans, right? Management planning and all that stuff. So it's very important to have the correct interpretation of what you heard.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Danica Littlechild. Yeah, so I just started as a professor in January. Before that, I was practicing law for 20 years. And so being so new to the academy, as they call it, this has been such an informative session for me, and I really appreciate everyone who spoke. I'm sort of interested if you guys have put any thought into like how, and this is sort of a follow-up a little bit on the last remark, like how do you go about properly kind of citing and appropriately describing knowledge of Indigenous knowledge holders in the context of like research outcomes. Because I think, especially when you think about the academy and its rigorous sort of peer review process and the kinds of like constraints that exist that I'm starting to learn about within universities in terms of publishing and that kind of thing, what you actually you're required to meet in terms of how everything is written and stuff. So how do you go about sort of balancing that? And I think it's a kind of a deeper issue of how does Indigenous knowledge get recognized within the academy sort of in a larger sense as well. And then just like a tiny thought as well on permafrost. One of the projects that I worked on when I was a practitioner was a lot with persistent organic pollutants, or POPs as they're known, like things like DDT, endosulfan, that kind of thing. And one of the scariest studies I ever read was about how permafrost had actually captured a lot of POPs. And with permafrost melt, it was like one of these sort of things that nobody really predicted would happen, but the re-release of significant amounts of POPs, especially in the north, obviously, with the melting of the permafrost, and what that would mean for animal health, for sort of Mother Earth health in general, but also like how we interact with the environment and where those chemicals like to live, where those toxins like to live. And so, I think that to me sort of speaks to why it's so important to have community-based monitoring and have sort of practical outcomes that benefit communities, so that there's something that sort of stays there that allows for people to know what's actually happening and what the outcomes are. So,
thanks. I'll take a stab at it. Sorry, if you hold it down, it turns off again. I'll take a stab at answering this question around interpretation. So there is a standard in a good standard to upkeep and to insist the outside researchers' upkeep is that they can't publish before you see it. Anyone who's quoted in it needs to give approval first about the interpretation. And best standard is really for them to return to a community and discuss what they think they understand so they can be corrected. And I don't know, there are research agreements that have this written into it. So this one thing that the CRP is trying to do is grab some templates, like to kind of show here's an idea about how you might want to write up a research agreement. I don't know if there's anyone in the audience or on stage who has an example of one of those. I'd like to see it, but I've signed them myself, so I know they exist. But I don't know, Frank or Shari, if you have some more insight into how to ensure that the interpretation is what was intended.
With our research agreements, like it is a very good question, because some people make their academic careers and reputations on that knowledge, and they get research grants for doing the work. So I mean, just like referrals, nobody makes a move in our territory without our authorization. It's a part of a research protocol, and it took us a long time to come to terms with the University of British Columbia on because they are a large research institute around the intellectual property. But we've managed to work through it with them, their legal counsel and ours, around intellectual property. And I acknowledge the comment about the protocols that you have up here in the north. That's awesome. That's what we attempt to do as well, to control that. And that's the new economy, is ideas. And so it's really important to protect our ideas, because, I mean, look at the pharmaceutical industry as an example, taking local and traditional knowledge and literally mining for that information and then commercializing it and commodifying it. So, we're very careful on how we and who we engage with, and then the quality assurance around the interpretation of the data as well. So it's all written into our research agreements. Nobody can do anything without our authorization.
Dieter, did you want?
There we go. Permafrost. I'd like to actually see that report with the pops, but there is one of the students, I can't remember his name, I apologize. His study is in regards to mercury being released in when permafrost melts. So he's doing studies in the Scotty Creek, or he was doing research in the Scotty Creek area, and I think he was addressing that issue in Summit Cay and I think Cazon. Yes, I'll say that, and Cazon. So the amount of research students that they have out there is quite a bit, and the work that they're doing to gather information just covers the spectrum. So trying to keep up with all the research that they're doing, it's fun.
We have time for a couple more questions.
Yeah, I have kind of a high-level question, I guess. At great risk of oversimplifying your collective message, I think you've really driven home the importance of grounding our understanding of nature in the context of culture and tradition and society. This morning's panel, at the end of the afternoon that I was on, we each of us, in our own way, spoke about framing nature in terms of economic values. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on, can we reconcile those ways of looking at the value of nature, or are we forced into choosing an either or between them?
Jump on that, or let's do more. Let us think. Ponder it. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Adrian Shimnowski. I'm the CEO of Operations of Arctic Research Foundation. And over the last 2 days, I've been noticing a very interesting discussion or flow where the conversations are becoming very personal. And the research is more about a journey and the connection between the land and the people, but main focus on the people, especially today in this panel here. There's a strong focus on the connection with the people and the land. And it comes from the heart. And from my experience working in the Arctic, I was involved with the search for HMS Erebus and Terror with the Franklin expeditions. And my good friend Sammy Kovic had told me a story about finding a shipwreck. And having faith and believing in a story, literally in 2.5 hours later, we found a shipwreck, which is pretty amazing. But my question for you is, what are the people, you're on the land, you're working with elders, what next? What is this journey, where is it leading? What are the elders asking of you as researchers to pursue the questions that are so important to the people of the North or the communities that you're operating in?
Like a couple simple questions to wrap up the session. Shari, do you want to take it?
Oh, sure.
Give the tough one to the scientists.
Okay, fine. I'll pick door number 2. Yeah, those are both good questions, and obviously not something we can answer in like a really short window, but I guess for the second question, just from my own experience, what I'm hearing a lot in the community and from the elders is just wanting to know that the young people have a path forward that's going to be meaningful for them. And whether that's, maintaining traditions or language or new opportunities, just that young people have choices for themselves that are going to be meaningful. That word meaningful comes up a lot, because that could be different things for different people, different youth. So I think that's the message. And then so in tying that to research is how can we work with the community to apply research in a way that sets up those pathways and those opportunities. And that's why we have youth involved and the elders at the same time, but trying to just, I guess, build things that have sustainability, that have options, and move the community forward in a way that they want to.
Take a stab at it. Yeah. To the first question, I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. Development and conservation. I mean, we have been about a conservation-based development approach. Doug made reference to ecosystem-based management in our land use plans. Of course, we use Haida and Tłįcho River Tlingit for the consultation and accommodation requirement, but really it's about what's sustainable. We're not anti-development. What we support is sustainable development, and with the Guardians and Indigenous protected areas, and like we've always had commerce and trade as Indigenous people, and this is the latest iteration of what that looks like, but it's not development at all costs. You know, there's our values and our ethics that are very important because our rights are communal and therefore include future generations, as I mentioned yesterday in the Chilcotin decision. And that sort of also speaks to your question about what's if we looked into a crystal ball, what does the future hold? Well, the future holds whatever we build. And it's the values and the ethics and the ideals of the continuation of our people and other people. And I firmly believe that it is about the values. You know, the newcomers, it was just like they thought the resources were going to go on forever, and it's clearly not. And so we're looking at models of sustainability, and that's what we have to offer the conversation. That's why it's so important to get support from our allies and our friends, and to use what the best of Western science has to offer, but being informed by local and traditional knowledge. And that's the path forward, to do both, to look at, you know, building prosperous societies and also take care of our future generations, because that's our duty.
That's an excellent way to end. Thank you.